Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show, episode 67. Now, this week we are going to be going over the weirdest changes ever. You know, when a patch comes out, it's always a good thing, usually. There's always some cool changes, and then we get a change in meta, and it's always fun. But every so often there's those weird changes where you're just thinking, not even this is bad, but why is this here? And it turns out there's been quite a few of those, so I'm going to be going over them not in any particular order because that's really confusing to figure out. I will be leaving out the last buzzer change because that's not a weird change, that's a stupid change. What I mean by that is the buzzer change was needed, but it was excessive. That's the difference. What I'm going over is the changes that are just like, why was this even in the patch notes? You'll see what I mean when we actually get to them. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now, there are quite a few of these weird changes, so I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I've got, I think, 10, 12. The first one is, I think the earliest one I can remember, is Bite. Now, Bite was changed from 4 mana, 6 damage to now keep in mind that was overpowered, and it was changed to 3 mana, 4 damage, and 4 life. Now, what made this stupid was the fact that that made no difference to the power level of the card. At all. Arguably it became better. So a lot of people were just like, wait a second, why was this even changed? Like, it doesn't actually do anything, and it arguably made a class that's too powerful stronger. Now, this was with a lot of other druid nerfs, however, Bite itself was just one of those things where it's like, what? How is that logical? There's a lot of these, by the way, but Bite is one of those ones where it's just like, it would have been exactly the same with and without the change. The difference between 4 and 6 damage is pretty small, especially when you just reduce the cost. Now, eventually, the cost was increased to 4, and that would have been a good nerf. But at 3 cost, it was just sort of the WTF moment when everyone was reading that. The next one down is Unleash the Hounds. The one everyone remembers is from 3 to 2 mana. I'm not referring to that. What I'm referring to is when they changed the 1 mana Unleash that gave charge to all of your beasts and +1 attack to its current version at 4 mana. Which was then preceded with a slap in the face in all the Hunter players. And this does seem a bit like a buzzer change that just happened. But there's a major difference. Hunter wasn't good. There was one deck that had an OTK combo in it on turn 7 usually, but if you had a Defender of Argus, you just played it on turn 7 and then you won the game, because it could never break through. So, it was one of those things where it's just like, alright, so we changed Unleash, we made it useless, and now Hunter went from a tier 2 class to a tier 3 class. Eventually this was changed to 2 mana, and then that became broken. But the point was, there was this weird change where they nerfed a non-top tier class into oblivion by reducing their only effective strategy. Now, this one is actually tied in with another one that happened at the same time, which was the original buzzer change from 2-2 to 2-1. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, okay, so maybe Hunter was too good. Here's the funny thing. The logic, and they show their logic behind a lot of changes, by the way. The logic for this one was that at lower levels, and I'm not joking, at lower levels, mage, rogues, and druids were having too many problems killing Starving Buzzard. I'd like to point out that rogue has Backstab, and then there's Frostbolt and Wrath. On top of, like, just ping effects, or magic missiles, or just or arcane missiles, but it's just like, okay, and it's one of those changes where, again, Hunter wasn't that good. It was tier 2 class, and you never hit the buzzard anyway, because when it was attacking you, it was Unleash, and then it went from their hand straight into the board. So you never got the chance to remove it in the first place if he had the lethal combo. So you're at a point where you're just thinking, wait a second, so you're changing a tier 2 class into a lower tier class, and your logic behind it is that players who are using classes with ping hero powers, who I just want to add, were like at the top of the trend at the time. Druid, Rogue, and Mage were very, very good classes. So you're telling me that newer players with those classes are having issues killing a 2/2. Okay. And I've missed some other easy ways of killing like SI7 agent. So it's just like, that was one of the ones which, I mean, it made very little difference because Hunters lost Unleash as well. But it only made sense once the 2-mana Unleash came along. But you gotta keep in mind, that happened a month and a half after this change. It just happened for no reason, and it was quite funny. And it was one of the ones which a lot of people were just thinking, okay, but there's some weirder ones. That's just the ones which kind of, you could see where they were going, just didn't quite hit the mark at all. There's some weirder ones. This is my personal favorite in terms of the try to do something and completely missed, which is Defender of Argus. Now, Defender of Argus was one of 3 buff cards that got nerfed because they were too good, and I mean the neutral ones. There was also Blood Imp was nerfed as well. But Shadowed Sun Cleric became a 3/2 from a 3/3, which made sense. It's a more aggressive card, and you can trade with it and things like that. That makes sense, reduces stats. Then Dark Iron Dwarf became a temporary effect, also kind of makes sense, because it means that it doesn't get the permanent buff on something like an Argent Squire. But then Defender was nerfed from a 3/3 to a 2/3. Now, in case any of you are wondering why, I mean, Defender still sees a lot of play, right? And you think, oh, how crazy would a 3/3 be? In all reality, it wasn't that much better at all. Like, the only thing, it didn't make any difference from what I can tell. I mean, obviously there is a difference, but it didn't make any notable difference to the card at all. The amount it was played dipped for 3 weeks while people thought it was bad, and then immediately went back up to where it was. So it was one of those changes where they were trying to nerf the card, but then they completely... I remember having Shiv and Moon on for this particular patch review, and she was just like, that was never the problem with Defender of Argus. It was a 3/3. It was the buff that was the problem. So what they did was they nerfed the body. It's like nerfing Sun Fury Protector to a 1/3. You're still gonna play it in handlock. Like, you just need the effect. You don't need the body. So it's just a weird change that actually in the long run made absolutely no difference to the card, and is one of those just amusing things where it's like a swing and a miss, where they were trying to do the right thing and just completely missed the point. So it made very, very little difference. Now, there's a couple of other weird ones. I'm just trying to check the list, see if there are any ones where it was like needed nerfing and just missed. I think that's all of them, out of those ones at least. Yeah, the rest of these are just weird changes, like out of nowhere changes, like ones that never needed to happen. So the one we'll start with is Mana Wraith. Mana Wraith used to be a 1/3. And it did its job. It wasn't that good, it was moderately niche and playable. So very few players played it, most notably Forsen actually played a lot of Mana Wraith. But then they changed it to a 2/2 for no reason. The funny thing about this is that it was originally a 2/2 and was useless. Then they changed it to a 1/3 and saw a tiny amount of play. Then they changed it back to a 2/2 and it became useless again. It's one of those, like, you put extra effort into changing a card that actually made a bad card worse. It's just like, for anyone who's wondering, yeah, 1/3 is better because it's harder to kill, which is actually very relevant when it comes to Mana Wraith. Has to be harder to kill. And it was a cool card. It wasn't that good, just slowed the game down a little bit. And it was niche, it was nice for a couple decks like Hunter Control played it. So that was always cool. But then they changed it for literally no reason. I did remember seeing this and it's just like, well, it doesn't affect anyone because very few people were playing it. I guess it affects people like Forsen, but it was still one of those changes where it's just like, what? Where is this from? Why did this happen? Blizzard has a habit of these, and there's a reason I made this video in the first place. There's another one which doesn't really fit in any category, but it's just a funny quote to mention, was that at the beginning of beta, they released stats for each classes, and Warrior was close to the bottom. And they had underneath it saying, we were surprised by this because Warrior was the strongest class in playtesting. Now I just want to add, no one in the community, and I want to add the community was quite small at this point, very few people had beta keys, so no one in the community had thought Warrior's a strong class. They all thought it was weak immediately. It took like a week, and yeah, Blizzard's extensive alpha testing, thought it was the strongest class. So they have a habit of doing the weird stumbly thing, and it's quite amusing to watch. But they have quite a few successes, like Naxxramas was a big success, but then there's just weird ones like that, which just make you want to facepalm at times. Now, the next one down here is Illidan, who was changed from a 7-6 to a 7-5. Illidan was dominant for a tiny period of time. And I'm talking about like 2 weeks, mostly because of tokens. And he had the same weakness as Ragnaros, where Ragnaros is good, but he's a self-defeating legendary because of Big Game Hunter. Illidan was exactly the same. Only less swingy. He was easier to remove in general. 6 life is not 8, is the main point. And he also didn't do something immediately, you had to turn to answer him. So, at some point, this was after he got played into, he just wasn't played because Big Game Hunter became a thing again, and him and Rag went into their sleeping phase. And then randomly out of nowhere, in like the lowest part of the sleeping phase, he was nerfed to a 7-5, which was both incredibly disappointing because it reduced the number of options you had for 6-drop legendaries, and also incredibly baffling because it made no sense. Like there was no Illidan dominant deck at the time at all. Illidan wasn't even that good because Big Game Hunter was back, mostly because of Ragnaros, not even because of Illidan. It was Ragnaros. Illidan was a fringe card at the time and wasn't seeing any play because of the Big Game Hunters. So, much like Mana Wraith, they nerfed a card that was like, it was cool, and then it was useless because the nerf bat hit it in the face for some reason. So, Illidan and Mana Wraith fit in the same category here. And it's one of those things where it's just like, why? It was so miserable. Why did they nerf? Illidan was one of my favorite cards as well. He's a token generator. I love my tokens. He was a token generator. He was 7-6, big stats for his cost, and he was nerfed. And he wasn't broken at all. He was actually on the lower side of the power curve. Mostly because of Big Game Hunter. Like, if he had been a 6-7, like Boulder Fist Ogre stats, it would have been crazy. But he wasn't. He was more sort of like War Golem than Boulder Fist Ogre, and it showed. He was Big Game Hunterable, and that's a big restriction. So they changed him into being useless for some reason. Now, we've got a couple others down here. The next one is the example that I love using whenever people say Blizzard don't make mistakes, which is Captain's Parrot. Now, this is one of those ones where any experienced player, as soon as you mention the captain, like, I mean really experienced, like back in September, you mention Captain's Parrot change and they will laugh immediately. And the reason for it is because Captain's Parrot is a 1-1 at the moment, used to be a 1-2, and they nerfed it. And in case anyone's wondering, no, it never saw any play before then. Like, it was still a joke card. No one paid attention to it, ever. It was pretty bad. There weren't any good pirates to tutor. Captain Greenskin was a different card, but then I wouldn't have even played a 1-2 Captain's Parrot to tutor for him now. So it's like, you play Captain's Parrot as a 1-2, and they're like, oh no, it's a Novice Engineer. Yeah, but you're only drawing bad cards. So you have this really awkward Novice Engineer, and this is back when Novice was a 1-2, by the way. These weren't changed at the same time. Captain's Parrot, too powerful, better than Novice, was changed from a 1-2 to a 1-1, and the entire player base was just like, alright, it was a big patch as well. And I remember reading through the comments, and they were like, good patch, and then there was a quote of one of the guys in the conference like, why is this here? And that was one of them. I remember actually getting a comment on YouTube saying, you're not allowed to call changes dumb. And I'm just like, if you can give me a legitimate reason as to why Captain's Parrot was changed, then by all means. By all means, go for it. But I never got a response. And that's not surprising, because there isn't one. There was not a reason for Captain's Parrot to be changed, it just wasn't a whim. It was pretty funny. But it also means that if Pirate Tribal ever becomes a thing, they don't have to nerf it because the draw engine is worse. And that was me joking, by the way. They need to add some really good pirates before that happens, and some better pirate synergies. But it was just kind of amusing that that even happened. It was just so random and out of place. It was quite funny. Now, the next one down here is Cenarius. Now, Cenarius was 8 mana, changed to 9. Now, nowadays, you can see why an 8 mana Cenarius would be too powerful. However, in the land of Miracle Rogues and Rush decks, they were like, you know what, Cenarius, that 8 mana legendary that you can never play because if you do, you die immediately. Too good. Too good. This is another one of those patches that I got Moon on for, and we were just looking at this and just thinking, what? Why? It was just one of those changes where in the same patch they were like, Rogue, nerf everything because it's too good. And then they nerfed Unleash and things like that, and then random Scenarios changed. Scenarios was never good at the time, and I think at 9 mana a lot of people played him, but he's only very good in slow metagames where his buff is effective, because contrary to popular belief, 2/2/2s with Taunt are not going to stop an aggro deck. They will do some extra board presence in terms of damage, and they tend to be better against mid-range decks all the time because they stop 2 full attacks. But as it turns out, 8 mana Scenarios was not too good and was actually never played. And they nerfed him, and then he wasn't played again until Raptor took full effect. And even then, he was only played in about half the decks because he wasn't a Windmill Slam play. If he had been 8 mana, I think he would have been played about as much as Tyrion or Alakir are in their respective decks. But he was nerfed at a time where it's just like, okay, this is a legendary that no one's playing right now and is not that good right now and has never shown itself to be broken in the past, and we'll nerf it. This is what I mean, by the way, by weird changes. It's what Blizzard are known for. It's the kind of thing where if Scenario's been too good recently because of ramp, then yeah, I could see changing it. But all those months ago, we literally saw no play and was one of the worst legendaries in the game. Yeah, or at least class legendaries in the game. It was on the same level as things like King Crush at the time. It was pretty miserable. So that was just a weird one. Now I've got 2 more on this list. The next one down here is Backstab. Now Backstab used to be targetable on any minion. Now the reason this is a stupid change is not because... It's not actually because it was too... Like, it was a case of not nerf worthy. It's a case of Backstab was changed along with a lot of other rogue stuff, like Shiv doubled the mana cost, Headcrack got increased by 50% from 2 to 3, the hero power got nerfed heavily. There was a lot of nerfs in one patch, and then at one point they were just like, Backstab needs to kill it. And it, to be honest, you only notice the Backstab nerf every, I'd say, 7 games. Like, I remember when the Backstab nerf came out, and I actually lost a lot of games because of the nerf. Not because of the nerf itself, but because I was not used to the sequencing. So I was trying to play Backstab on after damaging something as opposed to before, because I wasn't used to it at all, and they just changed it for next to no reason, and it was the final nail in the coffin for Rogue. I remember at the time, Rogue was dominant, but then they hit it with the nerf bat so hard it didn't appear for another 4 months. At all. Like, it disappeared completely. So they hit it too hard with the nerf bat and it just disappeared. Backstab, I think, was the really unnecessary change that didn't make much sense and just kind of happened. Whereas the other ones made... I think the other ones made sense in hindsight, but Backstab was just too much. The other ones did make sense, but the Backstab nerf was just sort of weird and out of place and was too excessive. But anyway, the last change I'm going to be going over is the one where it's an example of nerfing a card twice, which has now happened to Buzzard as well. And this one's Colt Monster. Now, Colt Monster was a 3/4, nerfed to a 4/3. Yeah, that was fine. As a 4/3, it was okay. It wasn't seeing a large amount of play at all. It was a fringe card, played in some aggro decks. It was okay. It was too easy to kill, I'd say, considering its effect was continuous and not a battle cry like Spellbreaker, for example. Like, Spellbreaker's good for its stats because it's a battle cry and then it trades well. Colt Monster is not a battle cry, it's a persistent effect, so if it dies easily, there's a problem. So 4/3 was balanced, I'd say, and it was actually fine. And then they changed it to a 4/2. This was one of the first changes where a lot of people were just thinking, oh, what? Yeah, Colt Monster got changed from, and keep in mind, this is in a situation where they changed a card. This is something I really don't like about some of Blizzard's design. They changed a card that was good in Arena, very good in Arena, and, or at the time it was called Forge. Forge? Yeah. It was good in Arena, and okay in Constructed. It still had its place. It was actually quite good in some aggro decks. Then it was changed to a card that is completely unplayable in Constructed, which actually made a lot of people rather angry because they like playing Colt Monster. And they're just like, you know what, let's make it fairly balanced in Arena. And that's something which got a lot of people angry, and the reason for it was because there weren't that many arena players at the time. There was just a couple people, like, basically, if you knew anything about arena, you could go infinite in arena. Just go 7-3 every single time, because there weren't that many arena players, and most of them didn't really know what to do with things. But Colt Monster was not really an exuberant problem, and then they changed it and killed it out of Constructed. And in hindsight, it's just like, oh, they changed it for arena. But that was the only change, in my opinion, that's ever happened based on arena. I think it's the only one. There may be some others that I've just missed, but I think that was the only one that's just been based on arena. The rest of them have been constructed based. I mean, they should balance based on constructed. When they add new cards, it's fine to make them arena sort of doable. However, when it comes to changing a card that is playable in standard and people actually enjoy, and it's not too powerful, it's just okay, and then changing it to a bad card that's almost useless in standard for the sake of nerfing it in arena, I don't think people are cool with that a lot of the time. And I wasn't either, and a lot of people who I was talking to on TeamSpeak at the time really disliked that change. It's one that a lot of people still remember as being one of the worst changes they've ever done, although I still think the one that's the funniest has to be Captain's Parrot. Like, that's just the funny one, where it's just, if you mention a bad, if you ask any experienced player, what's the weirdest change Blizzard has ever done, it has to be Captain's Parrot. Unplayable card changed to an even more unplayable card. No one noticed though, because it was already unplayable. But anyway, that's my basic rundown on all the weird and strange changes in Blizzard history for Hearthstone, at least. Keep in mind, didn't include the buzzard change, the new one at least, because it's not a stupid change, it was just nerfed too much. Or it's not a weird change, it was a stupid change, yeah. That's the wording I think I used. Basically, nerf was needed, but it was too much. These changes were just kind of like, okay, they were a mix of nerf needed, no nerf happened in the case of Bite. And the rest is kind of like, no nerf needed, nerf anyway, and just weird things here or there. And the last one, by the way, which I forgot to mention, is the secrets. Now I'm just going to say this one quickly. Secrets were changed from being able to activate on anyone's turn to only yours. Now this was for hunters, because you could get trap stacks, where you just attack them, misdirect, 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 like misdirect, misdirect, explosive, and it was just a weird chain. The problem is they completely destroyed Paladin secrets. It was like collateral damage. It's like, hunters, it's too complicated. It's okay though, Paladin will take the attack for you. We're just going to get all these one-mana secrets that people actually enjoy playing from time to time, just scrap them all up and throw them out the window. And that's what happened in that particular change. I mean, with Duplicate, I think Duplicate may be too good if the old secrets happen. But it's still kind of dumb that the Paladin secrets got so badly hosed. And this change happened way before Naxxramas was even in the pipeline. So it's one of those changes where it's just like, alright, so they made it for a reason, but the collateral damage was way more extreme than the change ever needed to be. And no one was asking for it. It was just kind of something they did. But anyway, so that's pretty much my basic rundown on all the weird and fantastic changes that have, for some reason, happened in the past year or so. Thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.